Dale in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Hey.
Hi.
The reason I was calling, I was looking forward to speaking with one of you folks about deism. I've listened to several of your shows, and unfortunately Matt's not on there today, but I've seen...
Sorry to disappoint you.
Well, it's not a disappointing so much as he was the one who made a few comments about deism, and it's, pretty much on the negative side. And as a deist, I would be thinking that, we'd be like kissing cousins or something like that, but it doesn't seem like there's that friendliness.
Well, we agree with deism more than with theism, because theism believes that there's not only a God, but a God who's an active participant in the universe. And I think you and I both agree that that's obviously not true. So we agree on more than theists do, but we also don't agree on that thing that there was a God, or you might say there was probably a God at the beginning who started everything.
Yeah, I don't have a strong argument or beef with deists, because I think the real problem with many religions is this idea of a personal God, or somebody that you can get favors from if only you do something for him, and then it ends up degrading into a kind of a, how can I screw my neighbor to make my God happy so I get my perpetual orgasm in heaven, or whatever you're going to get out of this.
Well, certainly.
And it's a trading thing that I think is very kind of, that's the heart of what's wrong with it.
Well, certainly we agree on that. I mean, who's more powerful, God or the pompous priest that controls God's mood swings?
Right.
So, but there are the part that I would have contention with you fellows on is that it seems like it's not a definite position that you're taking, unlike what I am. I'm saying that a God exists or has existed.
I would take exception with that, because I would say, where's your evidence if you're so definite?
Well, where's my evidence? Yeah, that's a...
Our position is really we haven't seen the appropriate evidence to believe in a God.
Well, of course.
And anybody can be certain about things, but, we generally think that you ought to have a reason to believe them, and I think that's where we're going to diverge.
Well, that's true. Normally you would have to have a reason, and we deists sort of pride ourselves in rational thinking. And, of course, it comes back to the old saw. If something exists, then there had to be an origin to it, or an origin to the origin. And as a deist, our people, my deist people, for the longest time, they've been looking for things that would lead them to God. For example, a lightning bolt hits a hill. It kills a bunch of sheep that's on that hill. People says, oh, God was mad at the people that own that sheep, so God did it. All that lightning must have come from God. Well, the deist is out a couple of weeks later, a thunderstorm comes in and hits that same hill. Kills nothing. Nothing was on the hill. And that deist goes, well, obviously God is not doing this. And in that point, he pushes God just a little bit further back.
I noticed when lightning hit Jim Caviezel while he was playing Jesus in Passion of the Christ, nobody lunged to accept the idea that God was mad at Jim Caviezel about that.
Yeah,
that's true, but deism is more of a process. We have pushed God back from living up in the mountains, living past the rainbow, living in the clouds, living in space, and now we have pushed him back to the Big Bang.
Sure, now, I guess we just push him back a little further than that and just push him out of existence.
we would call that the God of the gaps.
That's where your position gets almost as squirmy as the Christians. Because at one moment you say, I'm an atheist because I see no evidence, and the next moment you're saying, I don't believe.
Well, we see the evidence for God getting smaller and smaller and having to hide under rocks on the other side of the universe because we learn more and more about the universe. And what's the end game for that, right?
Well, maybe the universe, universe is probably not the word that you intended, since at the time the Big Bang was the universe.
No, there's multiple meanings to the word universe. That's the problem when you get into these Big Bang arguments.
Oh, I see.
mean, because a universe mathematically can just mean the set of all things that we're talking about. And while we know pretty well that this universe started at a singularity, at least that's what the mainstream science says, we don't know that the universe, in the terms of the set of everything that exists, was started at the Big Bang. And I mean, in fact, when you use universe in that sense, God, if one existed, would have to be part of the universe.
Yes. Robert Heinlein said God broke himself up into a myriad of parts so that he could have friends. Heinlein went on to say that this is not that rational or reasonable, but it is no more silly than any other religion.
Right, but let me ask you, what do you mean when you say God? What do you imagine as a set of properties that define something as godlike?
I hope not to have my feet held too much to the fire, but to be honest and try to be as straightforward as possible. People and religions and all do evolve. Deism at one point was quite much different, but today a God is like an origin and possibly something that would be difficult for us even to understand. But the Big Bang would certainly be the vicinity of where that origin would be.
Well, if you just want to take the Big Bang and relabel it as God, you can talk me into saying, okay, your God exists. It's just that, I think generally the way the word God is used, people accept it to have some more specific properties like intelligence and intent and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why the chestnut of the watchmaker that walked away seems to be popular, because it's easier to envision.
Right, but
that.
Even calling it a watchmaker has assumptions that sort of make it analogous to humans designing things, and we just don't think that anything like that happened on purpose.
Okay. Well, regarding your atheism, I would like to ask you, do you think that you might have been an atheist if you lived 300 years ago? In other words, what I'm asking you is, has the science enhanced your disbelief?
I think it's helped.
Yeah, I was laughing because I think that if you turn the question around and ask, well, many of the founding fathers were deists. I think that at that time they may not have understood cosmology as well as we do today, and may not have understood evolution as well as we do today, and the need for a creator God has largely disappeared, because we have concrete explanations that are sort of credible and we can demonstrate in these sorts of things. And so I think, to answer your question, I think many of the founders would be atheists in today's world.
Well, and also I would mention Richard Dawkins' quote, I think it is, where he said, evolution doesn't make you be an atheist, but it makes it more possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, more or less.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that without the science, you might not be an atheist, whereas the deist doesn't really require the science. The deist primarily says, "Well, I believe in one God," but when you're talking to a Christian, he says, "But your God is bullshit."
You could say that about anybody who believes things without a good reason. I mean, the creationist would also say we don't need the science. It's just that creationists will continue to actively reject a lot of the science that you might accept. If you want to believe something and just stubbornly hold to it no matter what the evidence shows, I don't think that's something to be proud of.
Right.
Well, I think the point I was making was that there was deists, those people questioning God and pushing him back, long, long before there were atheists. as a matter of fact, I think the word deist came before the word. By the way,
Sure. And
the
thanks
word-
for laying the groundwork.
yeah, you're
Right.
quite welcome. By the way,
Of course, if you didn't believe in God and most of our history, you'd be roasted at the stake or something. So.
as a self-preservation type thing, I guess, for us too. Maybe it's why we've lasted so long. But the word atheist, I've noticed, theist is a word that is Greek. It means God, from theos, whereas deist from deus, or deus means
yeah.
God, but it's Latin.
Okay.
Both of those words, deist and theist, by the way you break down the words, mean exactly the same thing. But traditionally, now they've been known that the theist has a personal God that interacts.
Yeah,
with
but
deist.
I mean, I always find it a little pedantic to go back and analyze things in terms of whatever the word originally meant. I mean, it's what really matters is how most people understand the words to mean now, because the words that you use to describe something just aren't as important as the ideas that you're trying to convey with those words.
Oh, I agree with you so much.
Yeah.
I don't know how many discussions I've had where someone's up against the wall and then all of a sudden, well, how do you define truth? How do you define
Right.
shoe?
That just leads you down a side path of philosophical
A
wankery.
tangent, yeah. Well,
But
guys,
were
were you about to say something?
well, we're running out of time on the show, so I think we're
I
going
was
to move
about to
on.
say that same thing. Anyway, thank you very much for talking with me. I appreciate it.
All right,
It's been fun.
it's been a pleasure, and I guess call back when Matt's around.
Okay, thanks.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Dale.
See ya.